Hello again. So we move on to our next speaker, Mgvdliashvili, who has a strong full-stack background. She has worked across some diverse domains, technologies, developer roles, and she's passionate about expressing her experience on development flow. Let's welcome Iya.
Thank you. Maybe I try like this. Is my voice audible? Yeah, great. Hi, everyone. I am Iya, and just don't worry about the last name. For safety, don't try to pronounce it. The closest thing to describe me would be a full stack or cloud engineer, but throughout my career, I've had a much wider ownership of the development cycle. So, for example, a role where I was the only developer in the whole department or even in the whole organization. Thank you. Thanks. So the perspective I've gained, I want to share what has changed throughout, like me experiencing those different roles that usually maybe are several team members, or even in situations where there were several team members. So what is full stack? I like to joke that nobody understands what this term means, because every time I had to browse LinkedIn and I would open a full stack job opening, it would be either we're looking for a backend developer, but if you have done Hello World in Angular, great. Or you will be doing front end, but full stack sounds more agile. And over the years, I was kind of the first one. Like I had very strong preference for backend. I still do in some way, but throughout my experience, I had to do more front end. And over the time, when I got a bit better at it, I saw how much value actually it was for every developer, for every full stack or even backend developer, and how it pays off. So some of the things that I've learned and noticed is that when I started prioritizing front end, because I got more comfortable with it, I saw improved timelines, and not just for the front end part, but like for the whole team, for everyone. And I saw that it also led to better design choices across different components, like different microservices. And then I saw our end-to-end tests get simpler and more straightforward to see and understand. So the content of the talk is why did I dislike front-end development? I had some prejudices about it. Why it's worth investing time into improving there, and if we decided to do that, where and how do we start? It will have, 3 parts. It's only 20 minutes. So if there will be some part where you would have liked to hear more about it, I'm very interested to know, like over the lunch break or message me, because I'm not sure which one is the most interesting to hear. So let's start by why I disliked front end. And the first misconception I had is that backend is more challenging. Like I got that opinion when I was a student, and a lot of people around me shared it then. Because I think if you're a front-end developer, it's obvious that this is not false, and also the next thing is not false, and most of this talk is very obvious. But then we don't always get to experience this perspective. So let's debunk why I had this opinion. So first thing with backend is you can always throw money at performance. Not always, but like very easily, much easier than on the front end. If you need better performance, you're one click or like Terraform file away of doubling the resources, which is something you cannot do on the front end. You cannot buy a better phone for your user. I've tried, finance said no, because it was like, this is a really terrible budget phone. It's very difficult to get this to work. So actually, it challenges you to think more about performance, which was for me counterintuitive to realize. The next one is coupling. So on the back end, I've seen whenever there was not a well-designed unit, the developers would just move the whole testing to end-to-end tests and test the endpoints or combinations and not bother with decoupling. And again, on the front end, if you don't do a unit test, the next step you have to do is a browser test. And now you're like, okay, maybe I can spend a bit more time and design the interface nicer. And there's also TDD. I found it more difficult to achieve on front end than on the back end. So it was like a very interesting and challenging way to grow in my capabilities in TDD. Second idea I had that it was not fun. And the reason I was holding that idea is because majority of my time when I did front end was not spent coding and programming, like things I consider fun. It was spent clicking around and getting to that point in the application, whichever I was developing. But again, it does not have to be that way. And if you take care of that part and learn better TDD, better testing, you see that actually in front end, you can have way more fun with state management. It's more dynamic. There is more things to consider and to make sure everything works in so many different scenarios. And I've been using functional programming more. So I really love functional programming. And I've used those concepts on the front end way more. But I learned it in context of Haskell. So it was not straight away obvious for me that maybe I would apply those skills better here. And one more thing I've noticed, maybe it's a personal experience, but I've had cases when I would decompose a React component into two, and the code would almost half. A lot of the lines would go away. And it's really a rewarding experience. And it's not always like that in backend, because again, you can mess up way more easily in frontend, and then it's also fun to fix that. So next part, I will be moving on to what helped me improve my user experience while developing it. First one is Storybook. And it allows you to view your UI components without launching an app. And it was, for me, a complete game changer. So after you install it, you just say, you're on Storybook. It launches local development server. And so if you have a button that you developed, it automatically generates these controls for it, for all your interface and arguments. You can ask it to generate different pages for its different versions, the ones that you check most often. And all of this is done very easily. So if I have my button component here in React, it has these props and arguments. The only thing I have to do is create the stories file. You see the primary, secondary, large. These are just consts I create. I just say this will be a story of type button, my component, and then it translates into these pre-configurations. And you can pass those pages different arguments. And almost everything else, so the controls, automatically, if an argument is a Boolean, it will use a toggle. And you can also define custom controls, but it has very good default controls. And it also has this autodocs feature and tons of other plugins to, for example, preview all versions. And this changed how I delivered work to the product team, to stakeholders. I could really show them. Also, when I was developing, I could see all the versions, that something that I changed didn't mess up something else. Yeah, it was a big transformation for my development flow. Fantastic tool. I'll move on to the next one. It's Playwright. I mean, browser testing is nothing new. It's essential, but Playwright really takes it to the whole new level, which I didn't realize I needed. So if you're putting off trying it out, just quick reminder that browser tools are not like other tools you install in your project. They're no op setup. You don't have to integrate it into your application. So usually with front end, you add a library and you have to really try to get the versions to work and the errors to go away. It's not the same with the browser. If you have a dependency conflict, you can simply create a different project. There is no connection with your code and the browser testing, because the whole idea is that you will be implementing the tests that the user, like actions that the user will take. So yeah, it's non-invasive, like you don't have to modify code to use it, because with Storybook, if you have very complex components, you cannot right away add all of them and make beautiful stories. It takes time. But with browser testing, you don't need to touch the code. You can immediately just like install it, and if you find yourself clicking around, just automate that one thing. It's not very difficult to do, and like get immediate benefit out of it, which is something I really like in tools. And how Playwright takes this to the next level, it has a very nice, well-designed configuration. So with other frameworks, some things that I had to either like add scripts for or like add logic to my tests, its configuration file has a lot of options that when I went over, I was like, okay, like this really makes sense in how I usually use browser tests. It has code generator, which I will show in a second, UI mode, report, trace, like it has a lot of things that make it a breeze to use it, and most importantly, to integrate into CI. So this is from just a snippet from Playwright docs, how the code generator looks. You launch, again, just from a command line, a web browser, and it opens either in the VS Code or like a separate editor. You just take the actions you're taking, like whatever you're developing, and it will then record all of these actions, and when you go back to your code editor, they're all saved. So again, like it takes a few seconds if you're already clicking around, just record it, copy the code over. You don't have to make it nice. You don't have to like refactor it. Just get immediate benefit out of it. And then once you're done, implementing, like I typically then make it nicer, like parameterize a few things if they need to. The next feature I really love is the UI mode. Sorry. Yeah. So a big problem for me with browser tests was like I felt blind. So yeah, I'm executing the browser test, but if it fails on CI or if it fails headless, I had to launch it again with like the whole window opening. I would like a few years before, but I would like record the screen to be able to see which frame, like the specific frame where the error was happening, which is so, it's like, you know, printing print statements for debugging. But yeah, that was my workflow. And honestly, I still know that it's a common workflow. So what Playwright gives is your whole test suite, what would run with like Jest or the test runner. You can launch each one of them individually, and it has this like very, very functional stack trace. You can view like each line of your test, how everything looked before and after. On the top, you have frame by frame, each millisecond overview. For each millisecond, you have what was logged to the console, how were the network logs. Like you have a whole overview for it, and this is also included in the reports that it generates. Not automatically, but you can set it up. Like, for example, after first failure, retry and gather all of this stuff. And the report is, it looks very similar to this, and it's just an HTML project. So because all of those things that I showed, they come right out of the box, you can, like, as soon as you have integrated, you can move to the next steps. And the ones I usually recommend are, like, of course, parameterize the front-end URL, and now you can integrate it to CI. It's very easy to install. It will run the web server alongside. No need to like launch or deploy the front-end separately. So like you can have it on the pull request. The code is pushed. It's tested with your Playwright tests. And you can add the output, so the HTML report with the traces, to the artifacts, but there's actually a much nicer way, which is to deploy your artifacts. So if there was an error with the test, something failed, it will generate those traces. And you can ask it to just upload, like you can add really one line to deploy that code to Vercel and output it in the pull request as a deployment URL, and you have a failing test, you can immediately click onto it and view what failed, why, what was happening, just immediately have a lot of the information that normally you wouldn't have. So yeah, again, I really love both Storybook and Playwright. I really love. It was a very quick overview, but let's move to the next section, which is more of a paradigm shift related. So why put front end first? Typical development flow looks like this. You have a user story, and then you're like, okay, let's create a data model that really satisfies this user story. You implement the endpoint, and for some reason, front end waits for the endpoint to be implemented, and then use it and implement the features. But here's the thing, the only place where you can get feedback from stakeholders is at the very end. So you're pretty much doing all of this work, and what will happen naturally is you get to the last part, and they're like, oh, actually, it makes more sense to do it a different way, and it's frustrating, but it also makes sense, because stakeholders really need to get their hands like physically on something, like touch it, view it, click around to give feedback. You can, and this might, sometimes it will just be a UI change, but it might be like, hey, we really need to rework the data model and like start the whole process over. And you can, of course, improve this flow. You can try to imagine all the possible ways. You can do a lot of things, but there's no way to completely prevent this. So as an outcome, you have a timeline affected. Whatever implementation is done is kind of rushed, and you create tech debt. And a different thing that has happened also, not once or twice, is that when I started or someone else started implementing the front-end side, the endpoint did not make, you cannot actually use that data model. So from the front-end developer, the feedback would be like, hey, actually, in this state, I would need this and these changes to the endpoint or the data model. So again, the whole cycle starts over. It's rushed, and tech debt is generated. So everyone is frustrated. And there's a very simple way to really prevent this, and it is to basically put starting the UI after the user story. Again, I don't understand why a very common workflow is to wait until backend is implemented. Who cares? Just add a TypeScript interface, return mock data from like the API service, and then actually inform the whole team and discuss with the whole team how the data model that supports this UI would look like. And with the mock data, while that discussion is happening, the stakeholders can already review, really get their hands on it, get a better feel, and pretty much everyone really ends up being much happier. So how much time do I have left? So yeah, that was the talk, and the slides, they were made Reveal.js. Most of you would have detected, but there's one thing I wanted to mention. There is this framework called Quarto. There was a Reveal MD, if you remember, and this one has like so many different generators to generate like reports or articles, and also presentations with just from Markdown files. It was really this was my first time using it for a presentation. It was really comfortable, so I recommend also checking that out with a bunch of other things that I recommended.